Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast brought to you by the Draft Professors. Joined with Ian Cummings and JT Olson. This is our final cornerback podcast on Friday night. So we have spent, I believe, the last 6 or 7 weeks breaking down 8 cornerbacks per podcast. Tonight, I believe we have 9 corners. But before we get into that, Ian, we have about 2 or 3 weeks left in the college football regular season. How are you feeling about your top 100 right now?
I'm feeling a lot better than I was a couple months ago, but also I definitely know that there's cross-checking still to go. It's a process, right? And one thing that, at every stage of the process, there are risks involved. I feel like there are traps you can fall into with setting up your top 100 or your top 200 or top 250 in the summer and in the early stages of the season. It's anchoring to early evaluations and like things that you saw early on that maybe aren't tracking. But then now at this stage, it's really making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's and uncover every stone, and also balancing who's going back, who's declaring. We don't know at this stage, so that's going to be a lot of sifting through too. But feeling good, feeling up to date, feeling like we have comprehensive evaluations for each guy, but also knowing that there's still a lot more reevaluation and shuffling left to go. So just embracing the process, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah. And JT, I know from conversations backstage that you are just now beginning to put your board together. So how are you feeling about the corners that you've evaluated just at this stage of your process?
I think this is a really deep cornerback class compared to other years. I've been really impressed top to bottom from this group. And, kind of starting to branch off into some of these other groups. It's easy to see not all of them have the depth of talent that the cornerback position has. So I'm glad we kind of started with this group for me. This is one I really kind of enjoyed doing a deep dive because it feels like every week there's another guy. He's like, oh, hey, he's really good. I really want to watch more of him. So I think this cornerback room is going to stack up really well relative to other positions.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the corners here as I'm retweeting the podcast. I got to take care of some bookkeeping. So these are the 9 corners, and I think cornerback 1 is in this podcast, but we'll find out at the end. DJ McKinney of Colorado, Jerry Wilson from Florida State, Jyaire Hill from Michigan, Collin Wright from Stanford, Will Lead III from Texas A&M, and then a strong finish with Julian Neal from Arkansas, Aveion Terrell from Clemson, Jermod McCoy from Tennessee, Mansoor Delane from LSU. You'll definitely want to stick around for the last 4. But we're going to start with DJ McKinney from Colorado. I think he ranked higher in the summer than he does now. But Ian, where are you in DJ McKinney right now?
Yeah, DJ McKinney is a guy I was really excited to see what he could do this season. In the summer, he was one of my top 5 corners, just going off of, what we have in the summer, which is the film from the previous year and projecting into the future with their tools, right? And you look at DJ McKinney, right? Around 6'1", 6'2", a little bit leaner, but super long and very, very athletic for his size. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, when I'm watching corners, especially, right, because it's such an athletic position, right? You got to react to what's in front of you. You've got to be able to move at a level where things like sinking your hips, like varying your technique, all of those things are muscle memory, right? And DJ McKinney, when I was watching his film last year, you saw a young corner who, had a lot of warts in his game, but had that technical variation that I was looking for, where he could play press man, he could use inch resets and off man and zone, right? He could play inside saddle. He could, kind of use the scooch technique to manage hip leverage in space, right? So a lot of these things that you want to see from a guy, such a young corner, he showed, and then also being able to use his hands and feet in tandem and press, right? So there are a lot of bright spots, but the issues were really glaring in the summer too. I think one thing being the ability to track the ball when he's working with his back to it, right? You have to be able to get your eyes around at a certain point, right? You have to have the eye discipline where, hey, I'm not in panic mode. I can still, work my way to get my head around while I'm in phase and make a play on the ball in vertical trail. And that was a big issue. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the things that were issues in 2024 have remained issues or been exacerbated in 2025. And then also he's regressed a little bit in some other areas too. I still think the athleticism is there, obviously, right? And I think the flashes of coverage variation are there. I think he brings the willing competitive mentality that I want, right? But at the same time, I still think, and again, as far as technique goes, I talk about the technical variation. There are a lot of things he can do. There are lapses with that too. There are times in press man where he oversets too far laterally, opens the gate. There are times in off man and zone where his plant and drive footwork can be more efficient, right? So there's still a decent bit to work on, right? And then being able to track the ball has not improved and regressed in some areas too, right? Where he's really struggling to get his head around and balance, making up ground and making a play on the ball and preventing completions. And then at the same time too, in run support, the effort has been, oscillating a little bit, which to be fair, the Colorado program 3-7, and some of those plays where the effort was waning, like late in the Utah game, they're getting crushed, right? Like, you can expect that sometimes, but it is something you have to note down, right? Effort, angles, all of those things, and Preston Hodge outplaying him in the nickel spot too. So DJ McKinney is one player I would probably, if I were giving out a grade, I would say return to school, maybe find a better environment that's more conducive to development, right? And allowing you to play your best. And we'll see what he can do, because the talent is absolutely there, right? And I think the flashes of playmaking are there, but he didn't take the leap that we wanted. And I think because of that, and because of the depth of this corner class, like we were talking about before, he's getting drowned out for sure. So a lot of talent. I would probably, if I were him, I would look at returning to school and trying to bounce back next year.
JT, what did you see on your first look of DJ McKinney?
So the big word I had with him coming into this podcast was inconsistent. Definitely saw the flashes, the athleticism, the ability to play multiple types of coverage. He really does seem like he has the talent to do it all. But then there are other times where he just has a lapse. He's caught flat-footed, some technical issues, and really there's just separation where I feel like there shouldn't be. I also worry that he is a 6'2", 180-pound corner who plays like a 180-pound corner sometimes. Like, I don't know that he always wants the smoke in the running game. Sometimes, it's an effort issue, like you said. And, we as humans, we know we cash in our chips sometimes. We're not always giving it our best effort. But I never want to see that from a player on tape. I mean, I don't care what the circumstance is. It's 0-12 and you're down 40. I want to see a player busting his ass to make a tackle. So I understand it, but at the same time, I don't accept it, if that makes sense. And then sometimes I feel like he can get caught up on blocks, and I'm not sure if that's an effort issue or just a lean issue. But I just don't think he always has the mentality to defend the run that I would want. But I absolutely agree with what Ian said. I think this is a talented player. I think he should go back to school with the depth of this cornerback class, because I think he is someone who, with a little bit of refinement, maybe a transfer situation. I don't know that, Deion Sanders, great corner. He was never a guy who really wanted that kind of smoke in the running game either. That mentality, I don't think he's going to learn that from Deion. He can learn a lot of things from Deion, but I don't know if he can learn that. So I think
Deion Sanders used to call those business decisions.
Yeah. And I feel like he made a couple of those when I watched him. So, I would like to see return to school, a little bit more refinement, a little bit more hustle at times. But I definitely see the talent here.
Okay. Next player, Jyaire Wilson from Florida State. What did you think, JT?
So this was a fun one. 5'10", 183 pounds. He is small, and he's the athletic profile I want in a small corner. He's quick. He's twitched up. He's super athletic. I really enjoyed watching him. My one big takeaway I had, I want every little corner to play the game the way this guy does. He is just feisty, man. He has that mentality. He wants to come up and hit you. He wants to be involved. He wants to talk smack. All the things that I felt like DJ McKinney was lacking, I felt like Jyaire Wilson showed me a lot of. So I really liked his mentality. I thought he's an opportunistic playmaker. I think he's always going to be a little bit limited in being able to make plays on the ball at 5'10". He just doesn't have the size to contest all the time. But when that ball is there to be had, he competes for it. So I really like the way he takes advantage of that. He can be dangerous with the ball in his hands. I'm just, it's always going to be a question of size for him. Can he always make those plays on the ball? Can he always make those tackles? Even though I like the way he plays, he is a smaller guy. So that's always going to be a knock. What else do I have here? Not sure he's a great tackler. I love that he's fearless with it, just small. One thing I did have in my notes, and this is again one of those things I'd want in the interviews. I know we talked about it with another cornerback earlier. He's on his third school in the last 3 years, so I would want more context of that. Maybe this day and age, there's a financial element to that. Maybe he's just getting a bigger payday somewhere else. But that's something I'd want vetted in an interview process, and that's just an answer I'm never going to have. So it's just something I thought worth noting in my notes.
Okay, and definitely a draftable grade for you, JT.
Yeah, I thought he was a really fun player to watch. He's someone I would want potentially in my locker room, just the way he plays the game. And he has the athletic tools to be a fine corner in the NFL.
Yeah. So, Ian, I don't hear too many people talking about Jyaire Wilson from Florida State. So maybe we're going to start that now. But what did you have in the Florida State corner?
Yeah, for sure. And I will be completely honest. This was not my first exposure to him, but how, you go into the season, right? And in the thick of the season, there's so many names to track, and sometimes certain guys you aren't able to get back to until a little bit later. That was the case for me with Jyaire Wilson. I saw him a little bit earlier in the year, and I came back to him for this pod, and I liked a lot of what I saw too. I think JT hit the nail on the head on a lot of those points. I think literally the word that I was going to use, feisty, which let's be real, me saying that I was going to use that word, acting like it's original. Like, come on, that's like a top 5 vocab word for corners, especially if they're 5'10". If they're 5'10" and they're physical, they're feisty, right? But I love it. I love it. It hits the nail on the head. It's the exact word that came to mind for me too. This is a player who, you go and you watch McKinney, and McKinney very talented, but the effort wanes a little bit sometimes, especially in support. Didn't see that with Jyaire Wilson. He's a fast-paced player, right? He plays the game with the urgency and the intent that you want at the CB position. I really like the energy that he moves with too. I think for a guy who's 5'10", naturally you got to make sure they check all the boxes athletically if they're going to be working at a size disadvantage, and he's quick. He's very, very fast with his feet. He's pretty fluid too. Sometimes I'd like him to sink his hips and play a little bit lower, but I do think he's a player. And, to be fair, I had that concern with Renardo Green a couple of years back too. I loved Renardo Green as a prospect, but these Florida State corners, a lot of times they will play with a little more cushion, and sometimes they'll play a little bit taller, but they're explosive, they're quick anyway. And I think Jyaire Wilson does have the sink when he needs to really gear down and redirect. He's fluid enough for it. But he's a player too, working in off man against stemming receivers. I thought he was pretty patient. I thought he was pretty coordinated with his feet. He was able to manage his hip leverage and sink accordingly. And he's a player who has it's interesting. I was really trying to pin down his vertical athleticism, because there were a couple times where receivers would be able to get past him on the vertical plane, where they'd stem him and get upfield and stack. And I think it's more of a timing issue, right? When he's being faced with a hitch route or a curl, he's really good at clamping down on those. He's very good at planting and driving. But when he's managing space and getting stemmed by guys who are trying to go vertical, there are times where he's a little late to turn his hips. And because of that, I think that's where the gap comes from. I don't know if he has elite vertical speed. I think his speed is good enough. The more compelling trait, in my opinion, was the explosiveness. When he turns up and throttles up, he can close gaps in an instant, especially coming downhill in support. There was one play, I can't remember exactly who it was against. I got to check the 100 film tabs I have open on my other screen. But it was a play where he was starting out from at least 10 yards of depth and triggered on a wide receiver screen immediately and just closed the gap in 1.5, 2 seconds. It was one of the more impressive displays of downhill trigger that I've seen in run support. So in coverage, you have a guy who's pretty good, very good coverage mobility, very good competitive physicality, or competitive, I should say, energy, right? The physicality aspect is actually a little bit of a knock for me. I don't know if he knows how to use his arms super proficiently yet, both as a pass contester and as a support defender, right? I love the energy. I love the urgency. But I think per True Media, he's got almost a 30% missed tackle rate so far this year. And you kind of see that on film. He'll come downhill with a ton of energy and a really good timing and, not wasting any seconds at all. But he'll also fail to engage blocks with his hands effectively or consistently. And because of that, because he's not engaging effectively, not extending and trying to control the point, he can get washed out of plays because he's really just trying to use his athleticism to get the right angle, which is good. You want to play positioning, but it's a physical sport, and I see the energy, but he's got to match that now with targeted physicality, and you kind of see that as a playmaker at the catch point too. He's got 3 interceptions on the year, but there are times when he can struggle to play the ball precisely or control catch point positioning too. So I think the big thing moving forward for Jyaire Wilson is really playing up to that physical energy that we see from him, right? We know he's tenacious. We know he's feisty. We know he brings that competitive zeal that you want. But I think he's still got some work to do with targeted physicality, especially for a smaller guy who's going to be out muscled naturally at the NFL level. But aside from that, he's explosive. He's twitched up. He's really fleet-footed. And I think especially in off-man, he does a good job. So do a better job picking up routes going vertical. Do a better job applying targeted physicality. I probably have a mid-round grade on him right now, but he is a guy that I'd have on my board for sure as a player to get in that range, and I could see him being a gem.
Okay, so there was something I didn't hear from either of you. I think you were implying it. Is Jyaire Wilson a slot corner at the NFL level, or is he a boundary corner to you, JT?
I think he's a boundary corner to me. I mean, that's where he was playing in college, and he can play there in the NFL, especially if we're questioning his ability to tackle, just a size issue there. That was a jarring number for the percentage of missed tackles. So just hearing that makes me very concerned to move him inside. But his tape is on the outside. He impresses me on the outside, so that's where I keep him.
Yeah, I'd agree with JT there. I think anytime you have a nickel corner, I mean, you're going to be facing crack and replace blocks. You're going to have to, get in. You're going to have to get your nose dirty. And I don't doubt that he has the mentality for it. But as of now, right now, 2 things that I look at in run support is encumbering blocks, controlling blocks, and then making tackles, right? And I think he has a lot of work to do in both those areas. So I think his profile is more conducive to success on the boundary. Even though he's a smaller guy, I think he has the athletic profile to hold up if he can improve his discipline and timing a little bit more against vertical pressing routes. So still work to do there too, but a good player, boundary maybe.
And I was judging based on the size, and silly me. That's why we have podcasts with people like you that are smarter than me.
Hey, the size does, the size does have an effect sometimes, right? But, it's going to be a really unique conversation for this coming class too, corners and wide receivers, because I feel like people, go into the wide receiver side. I know we're not talking about wide receivers, so I'll be quick, right? But, people think about an X receiver and, 6'3", he's got the athleticism, but hey, we're seeing with this class, like there are some guys like KC Concepcion, right, who can line up outside and beat press. So there's different molds, different ways to be successful. And I think that's the fun part, is these guys find different ways to do it.
Yeah. So JT lives in Michigan. I believe he's a University of Michigan fan, and we're going to cover Jyaire Hill from Michigan at 6'2", 190. JT, what do you want to tell everybody about the Michigan corner?
I think Jyaire Hill is a year away from being a really good prospect. There are a lot of things I like about him. I like his size, 6'2", 190, and he looks really good at that size. He moves really well. I think he definitely had more twitch than I expected him to at that size. He's fluid. He's fast. I think he did a nice job sinking his hips and breaking on the balls when I watched him. He's a physical player. He is someone he was going to come up and hit, and I like that. He's a little too aggressive at times, both in terms of run defense and pass coverage. I think it makes him a little bit vulnerable. He needs to be a little bit more disciplined. But I'd rather have a guy who's too aggressive than too passive. So I think that can be polished a little bit. I don't know that he's a great tackler. When I watch him, he definitely wants to hit someone, but he doesn't have great form tackling. So even though he wants to hit, he doesn't always make a good tackle. So that's something that needs to be cleaned up. He doesn't have a history of production on the ball. I'd like to see him be more of a playmaker, but he has all the length to contest. I really like what he can do in coverage physically. I think there's a lot there to work with. I just think he's a year away from being that type of prospect who I'm going to say, hey, this is going to be an impact player in the NFL. But if he goes back to school, cleans a few things up, I think this could be a top 50 player next year.
Okay. Ian, what do you have on Jyaire Hill from Michigan?
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. I was thinking probably a player who'd be better served to declare, right? And that doesn't mean that he's not draftable now. I'd probably have a day 3 grade on him. In this corner class, you're probably looking at maybe getting bumped down to mid to late day 3, right? But at the same time, I do think he's a player who, if he can return to school with another year of refinement, I could see him going top 100. I don't know. I don't know if he's my preferred mold of corner, right? He's taller, he's longer, and I don't think he's the most fluid because of that. We see some corners, they're able to counteract that and beat the odds and kind of, break the mold. I do think Hill has passable coverage mobility. I'll say that. And I think, to JT's point, I think the twitch and the play pace is really appealing with him. Again, we talk about competitive mentality. Jyaire Hill is one guy who, for better or worse, he's going to play aggressive, right? And you love to see that physicality. You love to see that ability to play up to the standards that you need to play at as a football defender, right? But at the same time, too, I do think there are some slight coverage limitations, right? I think he's explosive. I think he's twitched up. I do think he's a little less fluid than some of your other guys who are a little bit smaller. And because of that, we do see some aberrations show up on film where, if a receiver beats him on a quick split release, right, or is able to get upfield or is able to sink their hips and redirect really quickly on a route break and get separation, where sometimes Jyaire Hill does use his length to overcompensate and he'll use extraneous physicality, and that can draw penalties, right? So I think, still relying on that length as a crutch, and he's not the only one who does it, right? But when you don't have that fluidity, that's something that you can rely on to a fault as a taller corner, right? So I need to see him continue to counteract that. I need to see him keep refining his technique so that he's not having to rely on that so much. And then at the same time too, I do think, he's very physical. There are times where he'll miss tackles coming downhill. He can be a little bit uncoordinated sometimes with his engagement. When he engages properly, he can shock blockers. I mean, he can just reset the point. He can prevent displacement on boundary blocks, and he can, help constrict running lanes outside. But the down-to-down consistency is still coming along. And I also think in coverage, we talk about the over-aggression, like JT said. I do think there are instances on film where he'll bite on a double move, because the receiver sells it well, and Jyaire Hill is so aggressive. He's trying to, jump the route, and then they'll beat him vertical. And he doesn't quite have the fluidity to recover and make up ground as well, right? Because he's got to take a couple gather steps to reorient, and he's explosive. He can gain speed, but by that point, the receiver's he's already stacked. So, there's things to work on. And I think I would give him, a draftable grade. But hey, if you want to maximize your draft stock, if you want to try and strike while the iron is hot, I don't know if 2025 is the year, or 2026, I suppose. We're almost there. I don't know if 2026 is the year. I'd probably bank on taking one more year, keep refining your skill set for what you do best, and declare for 2027. And at that point, he's got top 100 upside.
Okay. Next player, Collin Wright from Stanford. Ian, what do you have?
Yeah, so he's a player who I was a big fan of in the preseason. Watching his film last year, I think you saw a player who was pretty fluid. I think, a guy who had passable, again, coverage athleticism. I don't know of the guys on this list. He's probably one of the lower tier athletes, and that's okay. There are guys who can make it work at the NFL level. It does cap his ceiling a little bit, though. But looking at his 2025 film, it hasn't been, I'd say probably close to level with the 2024 film. He hasn't taken a leap that we were hoping to see, right? But I don't think he's stagnated too much either. I think Collin Wright, for me, is kind of leveling out in that early to mid day 3 range. And sometimes those early to mid guys get bumped down a little bit. We saw that with Carrington Valentine with the Packers a couple cycles ago, where he ended up going in round 7. I had a top 100 grade on him. So when there's enough volume at the corner position, that's a position where we can see it kind of get lost in the weeds and guys go later than they should. And Collin Wright, to me, is one player who could do that. I think when you look at the foundation that he sets, he's a player who, again, has that technical variation that you want. He can play press man. He can, match in press man and, maintain angle discipline, not overset too far. He's fluid enough to turn and run with guys upfield. I think he's got the hip sync to clamp down on curls and hitches as well as some comebacks too, where he's got the sync to redirect and get around. And I do think his route vision in zone is one of his best traits, and it's a trait that he is one of the superlatives on. I think he's a really good player when it comes to keeping his head on a swivel, having an understanding and awareness of the route concepts and things working underneath you. Like if he's pulled up on a vertical, but sees a post curl coming underneath, right? He has the ability, and if he sees the quarterback's eyes commit to that, he has the ability to key in on that and trigger and come downhill. And he's made plays on that before. There was a really impressive interception last year where he was able to recognize a route breaking over top after committing to the flat, and he was able to get depth, undercut it. So I think this is the type of player that you're dealing with Collin Wright. He's very instinctive. He's very versatile. He's not going to be, an elite tester, I don't think. I do think he has enough speed to work with. I do think he has enough explosion. But again, he's probably going to be in that above average tier, not elite. And, that against elite NFL athletes, that could be a cause for concern. But I think he's fluid enough. I think he's got enough foot speed. The technical variation is really appealing. And I just think, it's a really difficult ceiling versus floor evaluation with Collin Wright. But he's a good football player. I do think kind of like Jerry Wilson, but to a slightly lesser degree. I think the tackling consistency can improve a little bit. He'll come downhill, and then sometimes he kind of just rolls his shoulder and sells out and kind of nullifies his arms from the play, neutralizes himself, isn't able to wrap up properly. So I want to see him again continue to improve that engagement. And then at the same time too, not the most prolific producer on the ball. I think he's only got 1 interception, 2 pass deflections this year. He's shown that he can make plays on the ball before. But I think the non-elite closing speed combined with around average size, sometimes other, players are going to be able to outreach him, out-muscle him, and he's got to work on the proper, the timing, the precision at the catch point to counteract that. So a good player, a high floor player with coverage versatility, with phase versatility, and with, the zone intelligence that you want. But also a player whose ceiling might not be quite as high as some other guys. So I'd say early to mid day 3. I don't want him to get forgotten in this class. I think he's a really good player, but at the same time, these guys do tend to fall sometimes. So he could be a gem when it's all said and done.
Okay. JT, what did you see with Collin Wright?
So I would definitely echo the athletic limitations here. I think of this whole group, Collin Wright was the least twitched up athlete I saw, and I thought it was a noticeable gap between him and some of the other guys. So that I definitely see that as well, to the point where I was going back and just getting some basic background information. I saw he came to Stanford as a safety. He played safety his freshman year, and I thought, oh, I could see that. I could see how this guy was a safety in his background. He just doesn't have that quick twitch, athleticism you see, even at the high school level sometimes. Like, the kids who can turn and run, they're twitched up compared to other people. He doesn't strike me as someone who was ever that guy. But I really liked everything I saw from him. I thought his tape was very solid. I thought he was a fine tackler. The only complaint I have about his tackling is I thought he was an ankle biter. Someone who dives at legs, dives at ankles, doesn't drive through his man, doesn't wrap up as much as I would. So he was effective, and I never saw him miss a tackle. But that is not how I would want to teach tackling to anyone. But some people do. Some people prefer their corners just dive at ankles and, don't bother taking on the 220-pound running back. That's not your game. Just get in his way, trip him up. That's not for me. That's not something I want my corners to do. But I do think he is a smart player. I do think he is a good coverage player. I do have concerns about the athletic limitations at corner, which is by nature a reactive position. I'm probably the kind of person who would pass on a player like this for a higher upside, more athletic person. So I could see where he would fall because I'm probably the guy who would help let him fall. But there's nothing that I saw on tape that turned me away from him. I thought everything he did, everything in terms of coverage, he did well, at the college level. I just question how that same coverage would look at the NFL level going against NFL athletes.
Yeah, and kind of, real quick, backing up what JT has said, I think with Collin Wright, we have a lot of corners who end up going day 3 or even slipping into the UDFA pool and end up, carving out careers as journeyman backups, right? Teams are always looking to fill out their depth at CB every year. I could see him being one of those players who has the well-rounded skill set and the high floor skill set and the intelligence and the versatility to, go from team to team and at least be quality depth. But I would agree. I think the starting upside is probably capped.
Okay. Show is shifting gears a little bit. So we've got a big finish, and the big finish begins with, we're going to be covering, I believe that's the last 4 players. Julian Neal from Arkansas, 6'2", 208. JT, what did you see with Julian Neal?
I saw a big cornerback, 6'2", 200 pounds. He plays like a big cornerback. He gets a little bit of the negatives. I thought he might be a little stiff compared to some of the other guys I watched. I don't know that his acceleration is as good as some of the other guys I watched, but he's physical. He's going to get a good jam. He is going to make life difficult at the line of scrimmage. He's a good enough athlete to where I trust him in man coverage. I thought he looked really good there. So he can stay in his man's hip pocket. He holds his ground well against a block. He's going to make a ball carrier make a decision, force him back inside, fight to get off that block. He's also someone who I thought did a really nice job keeping his eyes on the ball. He seemed like a very aware player. It felt like he did a nice job not just dialing in on his man, but having aware of what the quarterback was doing and just having that heady play that you really want your corners to have, knowing when to get his head around, make a play on the ball. I did think there were some times where, kind of similar to DJ McKinney at the beginning, I don't think I always got his best effort on some of the little things, like some of the backside run support, trailing to the ball. I don't think I always got the best effort from him on tape, which, I'm a firm believer, little things make big things possible. So I thought he cut a couple corners there, didn't always hustle the way I would want him to when really he was not in the play. But I never want a player to have that mentality. But overall, I thought his tape was very good. He reminded me a lot of a guy like Carlton Davis, not the best athlete, not the fastest, not the quickest, but he's physical. He's a good man corner. I think he'd do really well in press man at the NFL. So if you're someone who wants that kind of corner, I think Julian Neal's a really good option.
Okay. Ian, where are you and Julian Neal right now?
Yeah. Well, first off, little things make big things possible. I'm gonna stitch that on a pillow. That's so inspirational. Thank you, JT. I was like, oh man, I got goosebumps. But Julian Neal is a fun player. Again, I echo a lot of what JT said. I think he's a player who, and let me check out my athleticism grades here, because so honestly, this is crazy. I had a definitely not elite explosion. I gave him over an 8, so good. I think especially his short area explosion was really solid. But I think when he gets on the vertical plane and he's in a track race with the guy, that's when you kind of see him max out a little bit. I don't think he has elite long speed either. I don't think he has high end. I think he has good fluidity for his size, not great. The way that I broke it down was the hinge fluidity in press man is really good. And I think that's kind of, to what JT said and what I've kind of seen on film too. When he's in press man, and he can just be face up with a guy, that's where he shines. And he's shown that he has the hinge fluidity to align inside then outside, outside then in. Making those angle adjustments is pretty natural for him. But when he's an off man and zone, that's when he can struggle to sink and swivel sometimes, and you kind of see delays on breaks and responses because of that too. But I did give him one elite athleticism grade, and that was his agility and switch. I do think he's very fast moving in short areas for his size. I think he's got fleet-footed mobility. I think he's got great reactive coil, especially in press man, which again lends itself to that's probably where he fits best at the NFL level. And then at the same time, too, I do think that his foot speed does help him a little bit with realigning his base when his fluidity sometimes fails. And to be clear, I think for 6'2", 208, this is a guy who's tall, who's rocked up, and I think he's really fluid when you take that into account. But I don't think he has the elite fluidity and reduction that smaller guys have. So he's going to have to work around that. But going through the rest of the profile, his grade was extremely well-rounded for me. This is a player who graded at least above average in every category. I think the biggest thing that I saw, on film early on, and again, it's more kind of nitpicking in off man and zone. I do think his plant and drive footwork can be much more efficient. I do think there's times where he's, not always super smooth getting out of his pedal, right? Or swiveling to break on outbreakers and corners and things like that. So, you're going to have to use him the right way. There are some technical limitations where maybe he won't be able to do that quite as well at the NFL level. And then I don't think he has the elite recovery speed to make up ground and, make mistakes smaller when they do happen. But going off of the strengths, right? Press man corner with really good quickness, with good size adjusted fluidity, and with the length to dictate releases in press man, and his targeted physicality, his ability to play in support, in press, and use his length effectively was extremely impressive for me. One of the best run support corners that I have watched in this class. His tackling is super consistent, but I love how he can use his length effectively to engage and control blocks and support, but he's also really good at, and this kind of goes back to the short area quickness that he has. With the foot speed and the recalibration athleticism, he can get his base in the right position so well. Some corners engage too tall with their base too far forward, but Julian Neal just has an instinct for, getting his base in the right spot, then engaging and controlling blocks. And then from there, he can shed, he can make tackles. I think he's a phenomenal utility corner. I think he's got great route vision and processing ability. I think he's got good ball skills and playmaking. So a really well-rounded prospect. And he's a player that I keep thinking about my valuation of him right now. And I'm wondering, do I need to move him up my board a little bit? I think he's in my top 75 right now. I think he's around the round 2, round 3 fringe, around 65, 66 for me right now. Really good player. You wonder about the absolute athletic peak and the schematic limitations in off man and zone, but he's a player, especially in press man heavy schemes. I could see him being a quality starter for a long time.
Okay. So we've covered Julian Neal on other cornerback podcasts. That sounds accurate to what others are saying as well. So JT, did you catch that Will Lee's nickname is the Blanket?
I think I heard that last week when he wound up on our sheet. That's a good nickname. I mean, what more could you want for a cornerback? But honestly, I think his actual name, how can I not call him that? Will Lee 3. I mean, that just rolls off the tongue.
Oh my gosh, on to something there. if it rhymes, it's good. That's the first sign.
Right. I mean, Chris Paul put together a Hall of Fame career as CP3. I mean, you're going to be good.
Yep.
And I thought he was really good. I really liked Will Lee 3. 6'1", 198, so almost 200 pounds. I thought his physical tools looked good. Speed, fluid, twitch, all very passable, all very good. Maybe not elite in all of them, but plenty good enough. I thought he was very sticky in man coverage. I could see why he's called the Blanket. That checks out. Nickname lives up to it. I also thought he was a very aware cornerback. I thought he did a nice job having his eye on the ball, contesting the ball, using his size to his advantage. sometimes I did feel like he was a little bit too handsy downfield. Not as bad as some of the other guys we've covered, but still something that I think could be cleaned up a little bit. I'm not even sure that it's an issue necessarily, because I don't think he ever got flagged for it. There was never, a red flag where I say, "Ooh, that's a penalty in the NFL." But there were times I thought, maybe that's a little too much. So I don't even know that it's a problem. I just noticed that he could be a little physical, kind of riding that line of maybe a little overly physical downfield. But back to his coverage, his strengths, I thought he looked fairly good in zone as well. Just someone who can do it all. He's a good athlete. Really, I had really mostly all good things to say about him. I felt really good about this prospect.
And Ian, where were you on Will Lee 3?
Yeah, Will Lee 3, another corner prospect, kind of in that round 2 area for me. I've been a big fan since the preseason. He was in my top 5 corners really early on. I think when we first started talking about corners, way back when, it feels like forever. But a player who transferred over from Kansas State, I believe, and I believe before that he went the JUCO route. But he's had a really impressive ascension, and at Texas A&M, especially last year and this year too, he's kind of proven that he belongs at the highest stage in college football, which is all that you can ask from a player, right? But 6'1", 189, and again, kind of like Julian Neal a little bit, and some of the other taller guys that we've been talking about. You look at the athletic parameters, and he's a player who doesn't experience a ton of limitations despite being taller and longer. I think he's pretty explosive on the attack and making up ground against short and intermediate routes. I think he's got, again, really great agility and twitch and quickness for his size, and that recalibration athleticism lends very well. And I think he's pretty fluid for his size too. I do think there are occasionally slight lapses in hinge fluidity moments where sometimes he needs slight gather steps to fully realign, but you have a player who's pretty good at sinking and getting low in his stance and redirecting with efficiency, and that you always look for that first, right? Do they have a trade-off? And again, he's not like 6'3", he's not like super tall, he's taller than average, but it's still compact and lean enough where he can redirect and sink and do all those things. So a fun player in all of those respects. And as also, I agree with JT on the processing. I think, he's a player who you see him, more often in press man. That's when he's in his element. I think that's where a lot of the highlights come, is when he's able to dictate and press man, but he also has the fast feet and the angle IQ to match and, not give up lanes too early for guys outside or inside. But, he can make plays in off man and zone too. There was one play last year that I remember spotlighting. It was a speed turn in I believe off man or zone coverage, where he recognized the receiver's hips breaking out on the corner route, and he immediately got his head around and executed a speed turn, closed the ground, and helped force the incompletion on the boundary. So he's a player who can do multiple different things for you. He can make plays on the ball. I don't know if the vertical speed is elite. And that's going to be one thing. It's not something that you knock a guy down an entire round for, right? I still expect him to probably run in the high 4.4s. But there was a touchdown to Vondravius Jacobs, South Carolina, this past week, where Will Lee was a little bit late to turn his hips inside saddle, and he got burned, and he wasn't able to make up that ground. So I do think he maxes out at a certain level, but I think if you play him, in press man, he can dictate receiver releases and, disrupt their timing and make it so that he's in control. In off man and zone, I think he has, again, really good route vision and a good sense of timing more often than not. And he's physical, coming downhill. You can use him in different ways. He's shown that he can occasionally take reps in nickel and come off the blitz. I see him as a primary boundary corner at the next level, but it's nice to know that he can perform different roles if you need him to. A solid player all around. And I do think the penalty issues that we saw at times last year, he's gotten a little bit better with that, using feet first and discipline. Still can pop up at times, but overall, a really solid player who's got some schematic versatility for his build, but he's a playmaker. He's physical and support. I think he's a tone setter who can be an NFL starter for sure.
Okay. So, Ian, if I'm listening to you, and if I had to guess, because I haven't seen your board, you have Will Lee higher than Julian Neal.
I would say right now a little bit higher for sure. Now I need to do a reevaluation, but I do think Lee is probably a tiny bit more fluid, maybe a little bit more explosive, and at the same time, probably a little bit more variable with his coverage too.
Okay. JT, there's a chance that you may have Julian Neal higher based on how I heard you describe both. But between Will Lee and Julian Neal, JT, which of the two players do you like better?
I have Will Lee 3 higher as well.
Will Lee 3.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we've got 3 more to go. Aveion Terrell from Clemson. JT, you want to tell everybody what they're going to like about Aveion Terrell?
Most everything. I really liked Aveion Terrell. He's smaller, so we don't have to love that, but it's not always a limitation for him. 5'10", 180. I think he does a really nice job breaking on the ball on off coverage. I think he's really explosive. I think he's fluid. I think he runs really well. All the athletics are check, check, check. Feel really good about it. He's someone I think he can play on or off the ball, or on or off the line of scrimmage, press, zone, man. I think he can really do it all. I think he can even play inside or outside. I think there's nothing you can really ask of him that he can't do. I think I'd prefer him outside because I don't know that he's a good form tackler. I think he's very willing to hit. So again, another player who I think has a really good mentality for it. But I think technically, just the little things, the wrapping up, the using his arms, sometimes I saw some lapses there. So I might prefer him on the outside, but I think he has all the tools and all the the right mental makeup to play inside. This is a guy who I think is in the conversation for corner one. Someone I think should be a first round pick. Obviously, you'd look at the pedigree. His brother's in the NFL. He's been a high level corner for a long time. This is going to be he's another one of those guys. He's going to come in. I think he's going to have a really long career, and he's just going to be a plus starter for the next decade. Now, there's very little I don't like about Terrell.
Okay, Ian, Aveion Terrell.
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I know we're at 10:07 already. I get long-winded. I apologize. But Aveion Terrell is a good football player, the definition of a good football player. I think a lot of what JT said rang true. He's high IQ. He can play from the boundary or the nickel spot. He's, again, and one thing that you'll see from a lot of drafting evaluators, and rightfully so, is his ability to, kind of weird for a corner, but force fumbles. I mean, in support, he's so good at just impacting the ball, whether it's in support or at the catch point. He's instinctive, getting his hands in the right spot, with his timing, with his targeted physicality. He's one of the best that we've seen over the past few years in that department. I don't know if the vertical athleticism is elite. That's going to be the thing that I keep coming back to. I think against certain receivers this year, he has been stacked a little bit easier than I would have liked. I do think there are times I think when he's able to really unhinge and go, the explosiveness does show up. I think he's explosive enough for sure. He ran Deuce Robinson on a vertical route against Florida, but Deuce wasn't really running at 100%, so I don't know if that's an accurate representation, but ultimately I expect Terrell to run well enough. I don't know if he's as fast as his brother AJ, but he's fluid. He's twitched up again. He can play an off man and zone with inch resets and scooch technique, and he had some really nice reps in press man against Chris Bell this past week against Louisville. So he's got coverage variability, playmaking, high IQ, route vision, and discipline. He's going to be a really good player for a long time, and I think he's kind of a glue guy at corner. He's a player who you can put at nickel if you want, and it was actually kind of cool against Florida State. And to be fair, Thomas Castellanos kind of made it easy for him with the pocket management, but he had 2 sacks as a nickel blitzer against Florida State counted to him. So he's a player who comes downhill with a ton of heat. He's a player who can be used in a vast variety of different roles and functionalities, and I think all of these things are going to allow him to be a phenomenal pro for a long time, right? I don't know if the size-adjusted athleticism is certifiably elite on the vertical plane, but he's got the coverage mobility I want, and he's just a playmaker in every phase. Support, on the ball, and coverage, whatever way you want to spin it. He's a guy who can really help level up a secondary.
Yep. And Ian, don't worry about the time because I talked for 5 minutes and we started the podcast 5 minutes late. So the entire timing is on me. Okay, there's a 50-50 shot that Jermod McCoy is cornerback 1. He has been injured most of the season. I believe he played 2 games at this point. So I'm curious, JT, did you find any 2025 film for Jermod McCoy?
No, I didn't even know he's played yet this year. All my opinion is 24.
No, I don't think he has played yet this year.
Okay. I thought I saw something that he played. Was it last week? Okay.
No, he was so they're trying to ramp him up more. And I think he returned to practice last week, I want to say. So that might have been what you saw. But Josh Heupel, they talked to him last, and he said that McCoy's doing everything he needs to do to try and return before the end of the year, but he hasn't come back to the field yet. And I don't know if a return is imminent this week either.
Yeah. So I think McCoy playing even 1 game this season will significantly help his draft stock. He was cornerback 1. We had 4 people doing a cornerback big board on a Sunday in August. All 4 people had McCoy as CB1. The rest of the boards didn't look anything alike, but everybody agreed that McCoy in the summer was CB1. JT, did you go back and look at any of the old tape?
I did. I watched him, Ohio State last year. I want to see him against the best competition. And the word that kept coming up for me was effortless. He makes everything look so incredibly easy. Even against the best of the best out there, I thought everything just looked really, it's like he didn't even have to try. He just ran with guys. He's on guys. He's in their hip pocket. And I felt like he could have speed to burn there. He just was very, very impressive. Just very natural, aware. I thought he was a very smart player. He's got good ball skills. 4 interceptions last year, but even just getting his hands on the ball, passes defended consistently the last 2 years he played, did very well in that area. I don't know he's super, super twitchy, but I think he's plenty good enough. But yeah, I think he's a little bit just out of sight, out of mind with the year, being injured. Obviously, there'll be questions about how he returns from the ACL, if he's still, the player we saw in 2024. But he's definitely someone in contention for corner 1. And I think he's one of those guys who I'd love to see at a bowl game, and I'd love to see him against, more top competition, and just see if it still looks that easy for him. Because everything I've seen so far, it looks like he could do it all with hardly breaking a sweat.
Ian, where are you and Jermod McCoy right now?
Yeah, so right now, a big caveat for me personally, for the 2026 cycle, right, I need to get clarity on his situation before I lock him in as CB1, right? And it could be a Ja'Marr Chase situation. I'm not saying he's that caliber prospect. He was my CB1 entering the year. He's not like a blue chip guy. He's in the early to mid round 1 range for me entering the year. A very good grade, and if I wasn't factoring in injuries, he'd probably be in my top 12 prospects overall, right? I bumped him down a little bit within a bracket because of the medical, but I need to get clarity on his outlook. If he's just going to sit out and enter the draft process anyway, I think he could off of the 2024 tape, but there's a lot of things we don't know at this stage, right? We don't know if he's going to hit the field and look 100%, right? And guys recover from ACLs nowadays, with modern medical, advancements, and the understanding of the rehab process is better than it's ever been, right? So I have no underlying concerns there, right? But until we know, I can't lock him in anywhere, especially with the way that Mansoor Delane has been playing. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but Jermod McCoy would be my CB1 if medicals weren't a factor on the board. He's a truly incredible coverage player at his best moments. I think the comp that came to mind for me, and it's kind of funny because I remember JT mentioned this name for someone a couple episodes ago, I think, and I'm using it for Jermod McCoy, but Darius Slay was the name that really came to mind for me. I was trying to find comps for Jermod McCoy in the summer, and really what stood out to me was, again, the powerful, explosive athleticism. Again, the long speed to burn on the vertical plane where he can run with most guys. But the one thing that really screamed Slay to me was the reduction in the hip fluidity coming back toward the ball. There were some truly jaw-dropping feats of hinge fluidity and swivel where he's starting out inside saddle with inside leverage, and there's a comeback going to the boundary, sinking in his blind spot, and he's making an above 180-degree turn without missing a beat, and then instantly rechanneling acceleration downhill and making the breakup. Right, this coverage mobility and fluidity is certifiably hyper elite, and I think that's the foundation of his game. Where he's malleable and he's, he has the ability to play any technique that you need him to. I think in press man and working at stems, there were times when, his targeted physicality could be a little bit of a nitpick where either he's using it a little bit too much if a receiver gets a good break on him, or he doesn't quite have the play strength to compensate and hold his position against bigger receivers. But I do think overall, especially working in off man and zone, I think his fluidity, his closing burst, I think his ability to impact the ball, the route vision, the reactive athleticism, and the reactive twitch and coil, all of these things are A1, are S tier, right? So this is a guy who has almost a limitless coverage ceiling, right? The run support can improve a little bit. I think going off of 2024, there was some inconsistency with engaging blocks, with pursuit angles coming downhill, and with tackling form as well. When he's on, he's on. When he's not, it can be a little rough. So I think once he gets back into the fold, you want to keep improving that. But let's assume that we end up getting a clean bill of health, right? And I don't know how much we're going to see him this year if he does declare, before he declares. But going off of his 2024 tape alone, I see a player who is definitely a first-round pick if you get if you get clearance on the medicals, right? That's the biggest thing because we don't know right now. But supremely talented playmaker, has coverage versatility, and has the athletic ceiling that you want, where that he can go up against anybody. And then he's also got the chippy competitive mentality where he's going to size up to the challenge. So big fan, love him. The only question with CB1 is, where's he at right now? What's his status? As long as we don't know, I can't lock it in, but he's definitely in the conversation regardless.
So 2 questions for you, Ian. And I'm going to flash back to last year with Revel and Morrison, who were both corners that went into the draft with injuries. To me, the biggest difference is Revel got hurt halfway during the season last year and fell to round 2, I believe. Morrison, I don't know if he went round 2 or round 3, but he
I believe it was 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Morrison was 2.
Oh, was it 2? Well, it was late.
It was late. Tampa Bay, I think, at the end of round 2.
It was late too.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep. So my question is, would you say that McCoy was a better prospect than Revel fully healthy?
Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%. Revel had some technical things to work on. The athleticism was definitely the prime selling point for him. And I do think that he was a quality prospect. But Jermod McCoy is in a different tier than Revel. It's definitely it's not. I don't want to say night and day. I don't want to use hyperbole because Revel was a really strong prospect and had medicals again not been a factor for him. I would have considered him round 1. But Jermod McCoy is that breed of corner who could go, easily go top 10 in a fully healthy year, and could be CB1. So yeah, Revel was a great prospect, but McCoy was in a different tier for me.
Thank you. See, and I had it reversed. So it was Morrison was round 2 and Revel was round 3. I thought it was reversed. So I appreciate the correction. Thank you very much, sir. Okay.
And also, real quick, I want to add too, the McCoy conversation, it's not like he's off my board entirely. He's still in my top 20, regardless of the medicals. It's mainly the discussion of CB1, right? I can't commit to him being CB1 when we don't have clarity on the medicals. And there's another corner who you've just put on the board who's playing at just as high level. So that's the main caveat for me.
Okay. So, JT, this was your first look at Mansoor Delane from LSU?
Yes.
Okay. What did you see and what did you like?
Very similar to McCoy, actually. I liked basically everything. He's a guy I thought athletically, he looks very good. Fast, fluid, twitchy, someone who's versatile. He can play man, he can play zone. I thought he looked really polished, actually. Some of these guys we talk about, the athletic tools are there, but they have some things they need to clean up. I thought Delane he looked very technically good. Just every step of the way. I don't think I saw anything that was a concern. I thought his awareness looked really good. A lot of basically, it feels like I'm talking about McCoy twice in a row. Ian brought up Darius Slay in talking about McCoy. I actually thought Slay reminded me a lot of Delane. So I see a lot of similarities between these two. So I can absolutely see why they're both getting conversation for CB1. My only thing, I would just a little, cleaning up, wrapping up a little bit better. This is a physical player. He's not afraid to come in and hit. I really like the way he comes in to step up against the run. Just being a little bit more technically sound with it, doing a better job wrapping up and not just hitting. So that's something I think is fixable. That's teachable. That's, it's a knock. It's not, I'm not trying to say it's not nothing, but in the grand scheme of things, this is a really, really good corner who I really like a lot.
Okay, and Ian, tell us more about Mansoor Delane.
Yeah. I love that JTC's there. So, and hey, like Mansoor Delane is a phenomenal player, so I'm not upset to hear that. Mansoor Delane is. I'm pulling up some numbers right now. These are per True Media, but just to give you a kind of understanding of how good he's been this year, because he's been amazing. He's got, I think, all right, so per True Media, he's been targeted 34 times. He's allowed 13 receptions. He has 11 forced incompletions for a forced incompletion percentage of 32.4%. That's certifiably insane. And then he's allowing a 29.9 QB rating against, which is also very, very good. So the numbers back up what you see on the film, and that's that this guy is just unflinchingly consistent and just high quality as a player. I think if we're juxtaposing him and McCoy in a vacuum scenario where McCoy's health is not a concern, I think McCoy's athletic ceiling is probably a little bit higher. I think just a little bit faster on the vertical plane, maybe a touch more explosive out of breaks. But Mansoor Delane, and I think this is a throwback because I remember our initial cornerback podcast, and I think Delane was the guy that I brought up when he was coming from Virginia Tech, and the athleticism, the coverage mobility really caught my eye coming from there. But he's leveled up his game. And he has been a dog even at VT. And one thing that caught my eye at Virginia Tech back in the day, not back in the day, it was last year, but it was the coverage variability where he could play press, he could play off man and zone. And I think I forgot who it was against, maybe Syracuse, where they had him rotating back at safety, and you could just tell this is a player who can handle whatever you throw at him. And we've kind of seen that at the end in 2025 too. He can play press man and match guys stride for stride. And his reactive athleticism, his mirror motor is incredible. I mean, there's no delay. He just has that inherent, intangible instinct of how to match guys and recover ground. And, it's complete muscle memory for him, which is awesome to see. But then he can play an off man. He can manage 2-on-1 route relationships. He can, roll his hips and manage hip leverage against routes, stressing vertical. He can break on the ball really quickly. His plant and drive footwork efficiency is just stellar, and then he's got enough explosion and the acute angle freedom where he can break down on balls and make deflections. There's so much to like with his game, and he's going to be a phenomenal pro. He is, of the guys that we've talked about in this pod, he is my CB1 currently. And again, there's an asterisk there. We don't really know what McCoy's status is right now. We know that he's ramping up. We know that he could play at the end of the year, but I need to see it before I revisit that. But off of his play this year, Mansoor Delane has positioned himself as a top 12 prospect, as a player who could go top 10, and I think be completely worth it. He's got the schematic versatility that you want. He's got the playmaking propensity that you want, and he's got that it factor as far as the mental, the toughness, the physicality, the fortitude, but then also the intelligence to really fulfill any role that you ask him. So I love the player. I love what he's put on tape this year. I think he can be an impact NFL starter, and I don't think there are too many schematic limitations for him either. So it's a fun mix of traits that you have there.
Yeah, so Ian, thank you for that. So JT, we've gone through, I think at this point we've podcasted on at least 48 defensive backs. Who are your top 5 corners, JT?
I think at the top, the top tier is a list of 3, and I'm not sure how it'll shake out, but right now it's probably Delane, McCoy, Terrell. And then that second tier, for me, it's Keith Abney at the top of that tier. And then my 5th guy, it's a close race between Will Lee 3, Colton Hood, and Julian Neal. I think they're all pretty close together for me, various strengths and weaknesses. But right now, I'd probably say Will Lee 3 is my corner 5.
Okay. Ian, how's your top 5 corner board?
Top 5 corner board. So I've got Mansoor Delane, number 1, Jermod McCoy, number 2. I believe Keith Abney is my number 3. Colton Hood is my number 4. And then Aveion Terrell is my number 5. But a big fan of all of those guys. They all have first-round grades for me, and there's room for subjectivity if people want to shuffle them around. They're all very good.
Yep. So one of the things, so we have, for those watching, we have 2 cornerback podcasts. One is Wednesdays at 7. The others is Friday at 9:15. Different people discussing the same groups of players. One of the things that Clint Ghost said is that he said the combine changes cornerback grades more than any other position. Do you feel similar, Ian? How does the combine, could the combine restack that ranking?
Maybe for other people, me not so much. When the combine rolls around, I feel like the biggest thing is, there's 2 things, right? There's the 40-yard dash, because teams, if a guy doesn't run a 4.4 something, at least, there's concerns about him being able to run with guys at the NFL level, which, most of those concerns are warranted, right? But also, I think it's the open field drills where they're pedaling and swiveling their hips and transitioning. If you see them do that effectively, or if you see them lose their balance or something, that is a very, very small segment of time and reps compared to the weeks and weeks of college film that we have them doing pretty much similar things, right? So I don't like to double count it. I don't like to put too much emphasis on it, but it does have an effect. I think it does have an effect for NFL evaluators, and that's something we're going to see. For me and myself, in my process, I don't double count it, because that's when you kind of risk losing the proper valuation of these things. So I definitely take it into account, but you don't want to weigh it too heavily, because it's a very small segment, and the in-game reps are what matter most.
I love the double count. So Trevor Sikkema had an awesome quote when Xavier Worthy was in the draft. He says, you can't count Xavier Worthy's speed twice. And that was a quote he said right after the combine. You already knew he was fast, because we're doing all of this. So if you're watching this podcast, we are recording this before Thanksgiving. So the college season hasn't ended yet. So all the rankings and all the scouting reports that JT and Ian just gave, they're doing it based upon film. So they're projecting long speed based upon film, not based upon what somebody ran in the underwear Olympics. But JT, how does the combine factor into your cornerback evaluation?
Honestly, it really doesn't. Outside of medicals, I think that's the big thing for me for the combine. What I see at the combine should only verify what I see on film. And if it doesn't, it just tells me, okay, I need to go back and watch this prospect again, see where's the disconnect. Yeah. If he ran a 4.6 and I thought he was fast, I'm going to go back, and maybe he was just going against really slow competition. So I'm going to try and find where the disconnect is. And then if I can't figure it out, like Tez Johnson running a 4.5 last year at the combine, you go back, you watch the film, he's running away from players at Oregon. So what do I trust more, the combine speed or the on-field speed? I'm always going to trust the tape more. So it all should align. And if it doesn't, it's just a double check.
Got it. So why don't we pause for podcaster identification? Ian, do you want to let everybody know about your mock draft simulator that you run and all the other draft work that you do?
Yeah, so you can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at IC_draft. I do work on the PFSN mock draft simulator. I try not to advertise it on this podcast because Jim has a great simulator with his site too. So, whatever simulator you want to use, there's a ton of good ones out there. I help work on the PFSN one. We update rankings pretty regularly. So we're getting toward the end of the year here, so we're always checking weekly and making sure that we're as up to date as we can be. But I'm also working on a cheat sheet where I just type my thoughts, and we got breakout articles on the site too. And then you probably know, just I post clips on Twitter sometimes. I try and stay regular with that, and kind of give my analysis in the moment. So I'll always feel free to check that out. And then we have mock draft Mondays too, where you can send me your mocks, or I can do mocks for you. I'm on the clock, that's I kind of have to. So, but I enjoy it too. So, if you have any draft questions, IC_draft on Twitter, hit me up, and I'll always be responsive.
JT.
Yeah, all my written work is over at bucksreport.com, covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I did do my first mock draft last week, as the Bucs have now lost 3 of their last 4. So the sky is falling in Tampa Bay, and people are ready to cash in the season. So we are in draft season in Bucs land. So it's exciting that my two loves are combining here with the draft and the Bucs. But yeah, here every Friday, breaking down draft, doing draft professors. And you can find me at Twitter at Icewater Olson.
Yeah, so being a Bills fan, when the Bills lose, like there's a new mock draft like every day, or sometimes 2 mock drafts a day in some of our private chats. It's moderately funny. After a win, no, but after a loss, here's the draft that fixes the reason that we lost. It's actually absolutely hysterical. I want to take this few minutes and plug the Draft Professor simulator. There is no other simulator like it. So what makes Draft Professor different is that the players that you pick will move up a team-specific player board. So if Ian goes in and does a mock draft for Detroit, then JT goes in and does a mock draft for Tampa Bay. When I draft for Buffalo, there's a really good chance the simulator is going to take the players that they liked for their team. So that's how the algorithm works. It doesn't work that way in rounds 1 and 2. Like if you want rounds 1 and 2 to change, you need to do a lot of mock drafts. And if you like doing a lot of mock drafts, I like you already. But rounds 3 through 7, an end user has a lot of control over which players your team picks. So depending on how many mock drafts are done, between when you showed up this time and when you show up next time, you're going to get a really random day 3 mock draft experience. That's what makes Draft Professor different. There's also some advanced mock drafts on it. And if you pay attention to this channel, I will be podcasting how all those different, like first round challenge, second round challenge, how those work, how Fanatic mode works. And there's a lot of other functionality on the Draft Professor site that I will demonstrate on podcast. So that's my plug. There's a lot of you watching right now. Thank you for spending a portion of your Friday night with us. We're here every night at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. We're here Saturday mornings for one show. We have 2 shows every Sunday morning before games begin. So if you're looking for draft content, we have daily draft content at Draft Professor. For Ian Cummings, JT Olson, Jim Wickens, for the 110 people at Draft Professor, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow morning.